to loop you in on that.
Okay.
I sometimes don't know who's on the CC, but I'm the one who keeps my eye for him, so.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's for you to think about.
I don't really need to know anymore, so. Okay, great. So, if we'll look at the agenda, the only thing I might propose is one small update, and I don't know if it's here or somewhere else. Or maybe it can be covered in the action items, it's just an update on the Rent Smart.
Okay.
For people, so maybe I'll
Is
just,
that
I
it?
can't remember if it's on the action items.
Oh,
Action items are page 11.
no,
No, so let's put it in.
for
It
6.3.
really doesn't matter. Sure, yeah.
6.3, Rent Smart.
Rent Smart, and it'll be fast.
Okay. That's the next one.
Yes.
Any other questions, comments about the agenda? No, okay, I'll move to seconded, all in favor, yep, approved, okay. Adoption of minutes, so we have two sets of minutes, hopefully everybody had a chance, if not, have a look now, because we skipped over the September ones last month, because we had so much to do. And so, I've looked at the September and the October, and they look fine to me. Anybody have any comments? No, okay, so move to accept. Maureen, seconded, all in favor for both months? Yeah, so both September and October. Okay, moving right along. Public comments? Nope, okay. Action items, so page 11. I have a feeling a lot of these are just in progress.
There aren't that many.
I know. So, Fritz and I have not met.
Yeah, you guys are doing everything.
It's great. It's, so number one, Fritz and I have not met. We've been exceptionally busy, so we'll touch on it in the agenda and kind of where we're at, next steps, and what we're gonna do about that and timeline, so.
So I had to go for about 10 days to the Netherlands to
Yes.
take care of my brother, and then later to Switzerland to take care of my sister.
Oh my dear.
But it worked out.
Oh, good.
Some positive impact, so
Yeah.
that was a lot good.
Oh dear. Okay, so yeah, understandable, and I've been run off my feet with everything else, so we'll touch base on that later in the agenda. And then from July, I feel like these are just ongoing, or maybe should we just strike them? Like, how's the Speaker Expo and Housing Speaker Series? Is that something we want to meet and talk about, or next year? I guess at this stage we're planning
The
for
Rent
next
Smart workshops are essentially part of that, and they're
Yeah.
using the money that we
Okay.
have allocated for the speaker series this year. There is an event coming up, just remember, the 17th of November through the 19th that I'm going to. It's the Housing Central Conference.
Oh,
by
I'm at that as well.
Yeah, so the nonprofit housing association. So maybe we could use that event as an opportunity to scout and see what kinds of
Sure. Okay.
speakers we might invite here.
Yeah,
You know,
and
could
why
be
don't,
helpful.
maybe we'll just try and have a lunch together, like a meal together, and we can
Yeah.
show that. Okay, so ongoing. And then number two, I feel like this is ongoing. I haven't made contact with the North Shore roommate registry. Have you, Maureen? No.
No.
Okay, so
No,
ongoing.
I think Allison was going
I
to
think she was
lead
gonna
on
take the
that.
lead, so we'll check it with her next time. Okay, great. So, action items done. Moving right along. Council referral. This is Daniel about business licensing in phase 2. Take it away, Daniel.
So what I've got here, Daniel, is from the, you're not gonna be able to click it. Take them home. Yeah. Anyone else?
Okay, so what we have on the agenda is a report that came to council in September, which was an update on our business license. And so we're trying to, it was a whole report and a whole update on the entire business license program, but most of it really is not relevant to this committee, but of note, so as the committee probably knows, so last October we adopted our business license bylaw, so starting January 1st we require business licenses for businesses on the following. And so what I brought was an update, so as of August we had 293 applications, and I just got the numbers from tests. We're like 347, I think, applications. So they keep coming in.
That's more than we had expected. Our ballpark was about 300.
Yeah, and so we had an issue, like some of those have come in and there's been some holdups in particular now. We see you know, in August we were 30 waiting on fire inspections, and you know, they've done some since then, but it's now been sort of disrupted again, so we're still working through some of those pieces. So as of August 15th, we had $13,000 in permit revenue, but now I think it's 18,000. I just checked the number now.
So the revenue is lower than anticipated.
Yeah. And some of that is like if we have 347 applications, there's a whole schwack that are either waiting to be picked up. So people apply, and then the payment lags. Like we issue it, and then they come and they pay us. There's sort of a lag between applications coming in and when the revenue. So I haven't done a new projection of like what the revenue would be if all the applications paid. Because I think I'd done that at this point, and I said if all the applications came and paid, we'd be at 25,000 essentially. And so we've now had 50 more applications, so it would be, you know, see it, it's going to be close probably to 30,000.
And the lowest application fee is $25, isn't
Yeah.
it? Well, I mean, there's 0 for nonprofits,
Yeah,
but
and 25.
So
Yeah.
I mean, I can imagine there's a chunk that are $25.
Yeah.
Like I think I saw somewhere in the report the average fee is like $75 or $85
Yeah.
or something.
Yeah.
That's good.
I need to check in. I know that our business license inspector has seen the initial soft launch or whatever of the online registry of business licenses. So I'm excited, and that will be a good thing that comes out. People can then come on the website and search for licensed businesses on one. Something that will be helpful too as we go forward and we have more confidence that, you know, most businesses have licenses in terms of even our mailing and stuff, that it's like we want to contact everybody in this industry. It's like we can safely do it through our list. And then people complain that they weren't contacted. We're like, well, you probably should have had a business license if you wanted to be included. This is about some feedback we've got. All right. All right. So when this originally came forward from the EDC, they had done this whole encompassing review and recommendations about business licenses in Bowen. And one of the things they said at the time was that a phase 2 consideration of it would be business licenses for secondary suites. So we came forward, then staff came forward with the adoption, said, okay, we'll consider phase 2 secondary suites when we do a review of the business license bylaw itself. And so when I brought this report to council, I had flagged that as something we said we were going to look at as phase 2. And so what my report had said, what this presentation says, is that we would have concerns about the number of suites on Bowen that were built prior to legalization in 2008, many of which will not be able to meet current standards. So we had that, the trade-off between wanting to ensure, because part of the licensing of it, one is to sort of ensure, I guess, level playing field. So the thing you mean when we license short-term rentals and we're licensing, you know, an Airbnb unit, we're also licensing people who are renting out and acting as a landlord. And the idea being partly that, you know, like if you own, say for example, the townhouse is down below and you own that and you're renting them out, you're a landlord, and that's a business, right? It's a business operation and you should have a business license. And then if you own 3 houses on Bowen, each with a house and a suite, and you rent all those out, well, you're equally a business. So what's the line then if you're a homeowner and you rent out a suite, or you're a landlord with a business and you should be licensed accordingly? It should be a fair, consistent playing field. But then the worry being that currently our business license bylaw is that, well, when you get a permit, we're confirming that you're meeting zoning, you're meeting occupancy, you're meeting those safety concerns. So for example, if you apply for a bed and breakfast, we check that your guest room is actually an occupancy as a bedroom and it's not a shed that somebody's converted to a bedroom that doesn't have any egress and is not safe and all those things. But so then the concern for me was then issuing licenses for secondary suites, a number of them built before 2008. So by definition, they were built without a permit. Some of which is fixable and some of which is not, but also it's that some of them will be too big, so they won't meet it. Some of them will be, what our bylaw currently is it will be 40% of the floor area of the dwelling. So if you built a 2,000 square foot building with 1,000 square suite on each level, they're exactly the same. Well, we would say, well, now you're 50%. You can't do it.
Daniel, I would make the point that if someone's renting out multiple suites,
yeah,
I quite understand that as a business.
Yeah.
But if someone has one suite in their home, I would probably argue that is really not a business as such. I mean, because I just see us going down Sleepy Hollow here, and one in my home I have one suite, and that is rented out.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have to discuss it now, but I just not sure that's the route I'd like to pursue. Now, if someone has several suites and several houses, okay, that's a different deal. They are running a business. I see a
Yeah, but this is about safety, right? So that,
well, yes, but then you've got to enforce all this, and as well, are you going to take a lot of stuff out of the market that you would really, at this moment in time, not want to do straight away? And I'm not even sure, could you do it straight away if you had some, or could you find
if the fire department has some leeway and they can make a judgment, but you know what I mean, but if there's places that is truly simply unsafe and unlivable, then do you really want us to rent it out?
No, I think well, we do not.
Oh, sorry,
I'm just wondering whether
yeah.
this is something we would have to look at pretty closely before looking at that single suite in a home. I just see some issues there. I see the safety stuff, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at the other issues that right now, and you know, in terms of what's out there and what's manageable.
Is there any way of grandfathering? I mean, like not grandfathering in necessarily in their entirety,
Yeah.
but
I mean, that's something I think I want to look at. Like, I was just looking before, and like I can see Delta requires business licenses for secondary suites, and the city of Vancouver requires it. And there's this whole page on like how to legalize your secondary suite, and what steps you have to take to do it. And I think the building inspector has leeway in terms of, right, it's like an older house and it wasn't built, but then it's like, what does he require and does it meet the full whatever versus like, you know, it's like health and safety checks essentially. What's trickier than to have the leeway is like the size, like the zoning pieces, right? And so we say, well, it's too big, but it's okay if it was there.
so
But by definition, it wasn't okay when it was built because we built it before we allowed it. So it's like, there's no, we can't say, well, it's existing. Unless it's from the 60s or something.
That issue that we addressed in the last meeting, that was with the Housing Advisory Committee, right, for the Dallas Marina.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is that that was referred to the Housing Advisory Committee, and it gave clear reasons why that actually was a good situation, right? So now if you run into areas where the bylaw doesn't work, and it seems to be this, you know, not reasonable or not achieving any of the policies or objectives, I should say, right? Then it's maybe worthwhile to send them to ours.
Yeah.
And then it becomes more like an answer, because like we already said, we think the requirements for floor space are just a hindrance. Like, why can't the owner live in the smaller suite, for instance, or why can't you rent out your house in your suite? It's all in the recommendations. Now we even just get these recommendations clearly out, right? But I like these referrals because then everybody sees an example. And this thing comes to us, oh, wait a second.
I'm just wondering about volume. I don't have a clear idea how many suites we're talking about here. I would imagine it's a significant number.
I had a few comments. I'm very much on the fence. I don't have a definitive opinion yet as to whether we should cross that line. I hear what Michael's saying about this one suite. You know, in your building, you're not truly a commercial operation. I think that's, and I don't know this, but I'm pretty sure that's in line with like, with what Canada Revenue Agency considers as well. Like, there's, you know, certain tax implications if you rent out a property, but it's different if you rent a suite in your property. So like, it's kind of, there is this line between your principal resident with one suite, and there's sort of, that's an understandable thing, as opposed to a commercial venture that is a separate thing or whatever. So, I mean, there is an argument for that line if we wanted to draw it. And I think based on a lot of our work we've done recently, our overarching thing is we don't want to discourage rentals, which I saw in your report, so like, that's a big thing.
Like, maybe it doesn't need to be called a business license. It is just called a requirement for an inspection by the fire department.
You're just registering it.
And they just make recommendations.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking is, I like that you said an emphasis on health and safety. I seem to remember that Vancouver did something like this a while ago where they knew there was a whole bunch of illegal basements, so they basically said, look, okay, here's the bare minimum requirements, like bare minimum ceiling height, bare minimum egress, you know?
Yeah.
So, but that's a process, right? And you're working with the building inspector, but that's what I'm wondering about this grandfathering thing, is if you say, okay, we want to register you, we want to make sure it's, the health and safety of the unit is appropriate. What does that look like? I'm not sure, but some sort of strategy for that, as opposed to, because you can just see, like, you would maybe have dozens of units that don't comply, that are needing permits, that are needing zoning, like variances, you know, like we don't have enough variances on the books at the moment, right? Like, and is that really the way we want to go? So that's what, just off the top of my head, I'm thinking is if they're, and that might be the work over the next year, right? Because you're not proposing to do this for next year, is coming up with some sort of strategy, and maybe you even engage with the public, right? Some of these owners. What is a strategy to make sure they're, because I agree, like if there's ones out there that are not healthy and safe, they shouldn't be there. Like, I hate to take away rental units, but I don't want somebody living in something that's dangerous or full of mold or whatever it is that's making them sick. So I think that we kind of need to draw that as a baseline, but, you know, yeah, does it meet the zoning in terms of floor space? Does it meet, you know, maybe there's ceiling height things, like, I don't know, but kind of minimum egress and minimum health and safety would be a focus. But yeah, the advantages I see to doing it are that safety and enforcement, whatever baseline we choose, and also kind of the same thing that I thought from the economic development thing is getting data. Like, if we can convince people and not scare them away to actually register and keep the price very low, like it doesn't have to be onerous, whether it's free or that $25 or whatever it is, keep it really low, we will know. Like, we'll know what's out there in terms of the stock, we'll know how it's being used, because they'll register if it's a secondary suite, they'll register if it's a B&B or a short-term rental. Like, we'll start to have a picture of the stock that on the island that's more than we have now.
If you issuance of a business license, right?
Yeah.
Does that imply that you have to meet the zoning and the building?
Yeah.
So it does, right?
Yeah.
So then, if it's not called a business license, and as Michael was saying, but it just means that you have to have a review for recommendations to meet the minimum requirements, as you found online.
Yeah.
If that's all it is, then isn't it this? That implies you don't have to meet all the strict requirements from the building bylaw and zoning, but it still allows for a basic inspection for safety and livability. And out of that would just come some recommendations that an owner should make. Now, I don't know if you then, to which degree you have to enforce it, but like, it's more like if if the fire department says, well, look, I have no idea how these people get out if there's a fire, well, then they probably are going to address that.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? Or you have to say from the minimum requirements as outlined by the fire department needs to be addressed. It doesn't mean that you say that it's a business license and now you have to meet all the zoning and building code requirements.
Yeah. And maybe, like Maureen was suggesting with grandfathering, there's certain dates, right? Like I know in Vancouver there's zoning says if the building was built before, 1982 or whatever, for us 2008 or whatever that number is, that then you go down this, it could be like a flow chart. Like if you were built pre this date, you go down this compliance path, which is really the focus on health and safety, and it's some sort of agreement between the fire chief and the building inspector as to what the minimum thing would be. If you were built after this, you have to comply with X, Y, and Z, the zoning. Yeah. Like again, just trying to encourage rental units, but making sure that they're
I was
safe.
just trying to respond to what Michael was saying. That a lot of people feel it's not really a business, and they just like to rent out one room.
Yeah.
And then if you say based on that, you say if it's only one suite, you just say that there would be an inspection every 3 years or so by the fire department that everything is okay.
Yeah.
I mean, we have inspections in our building every 6 months, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Not a house, we have a little commercial building, and believe me, you keep it up to date.
They come and inspect, yeah. Maureen?
Yeah. I've been trying to find the initial business licensing report, because if I'm remembering correctly, when we looked at our comparator communities, very few, if any,
Yeah, it was a minority for sure, and it was like a couple. Yeah.
And the issues were similar
Yeah.
to what we're talking about.
And so the point you're making that I hear, Fritz, is it a business license versus some form of a registry or something, right? Like that's what you're kind of drawing the line. And I'm guessing it's just because now the business license is this setup thing, and it's going to have an online thing, it's gonna have a database. I'm guessing that's why it's easy to just lump it in with all of that. So whether, I don't know if it can be called something else.
So you could call it fire department review.
Yeah.
Inspection, it sounds language, a bit
Like a sweet registry or something people have.
Yeah,
Why would somebody volunteer for this?
yeah, exactly.
Why would a homeowner?
from a liability point of view.
From a liability,
I would,
okay.
for sure.
Yeah.
In the sense that
Well,
you would
let's say
have.
if you have a fire, somebody dies in your house and you haven't taken any precautions,
Okay.
it doesn't look so good.
Okay,
But if the fire department, who is like in the island, I think, has some kind of, can do a review and make some recommendations.
okay.
then
Yeah,
maybe
like
it
you say,
deals with
basic
what
health and
Michael
safety.
said.
Is there an egress window? Is there, smoke detectors?
Are there-
Those kinds of basics.
Are there other reasons why somebody would volunteer themselves and say, I have an illegal suite, I want to get on this registry? Like what?
You're selling your house.
You're selling your house, okay?
Yeah.
Because we're going to have like a list of,
Well,
these
yeah,
are the
exactly.
advantages for coming forward.
Because
Oh,
they-
yeah, I agree. I think it's a
They
good
have an
question. Mike.
insurance nightmare if you think about somebody kind of with an illegal suite. I wonder what's registered on their, for their sake, on their house insurance, which is frankly none of our business. But let's supposing it is registered properly on the insurance, then the insurers would normally take basic steps to make sure that if you are doing this and you're receiving rent and all the rest, the insurers would want to know. And forgive me, I'm not sure where this takes us down, but the insurers would then say, okay, you're insuring your house and you're telling us, thank you, that you've got this suite. Well, okay, we might want to just look at a few things. I know when we insured our house, they were all over it for little bits and pieces. We had a fireplace and, the usual,
Yeah.
fall down chimney and all the rest of this stuff. So that that would be another one for the insurers. And I'm not sure they would want themselves to be on a register if they just have one suite in a house. They might not. It's kind of a private thing. It's your home. You got one suite. You might not want to be on a registry. I would have thought.
Certainly not public. I think
Yeah.
that's also
Yeah.
something we
You
have to
would
make sure,
want-
because I get with businesses that they're
Yeah.
publicly listed.
Promotion is good.
But I think this is a good point, privacy.
Yeah.
We wouldn't want this to be a public list, for sure.
Yeah. That's why I was kind of anxious to see if we could somehow
Yeah.
achieve some objectives as the health and safety, yet take it out of this domain, because I just see it being rather difficult.
It would be an advantage to a landlord to be able to say to a potential tenant, I am on the municipal registry. So the sort of publicly listing it would be one thing, but being able to confirm that you're on a registry and you've met health and safety standards and so forth might be appealing to owners seeking good tenants.
And as a community, it's public safety, right? It's
Yes.
knowing that as a community, people are advertising something to rent, that it meets these, whatever we decide or, is decided, these minimum health and safety standards. You can be
Robyn,
confident.
sadly, the market is such right now. If anybody is advertising as a suite, I could think the last thing people are going to do is start raising, I'm afraid, some health. Because one hears, I'm sure some people that I've heard about recently, they were just glad to have somewhere frankly, to sleep. I shudder to think whether mold and other things or proper egress was in place. My doubt is that the state of the market right now is. I just ask to bear that in mind, because just supposing we eliminated 20 suites across the island because of things that we're doing, you'd have to ask yourself right now, that for the very best of reasons, which I subscribe and would vote for, are we actually doing the island a favour as things stand right now. But in terms of what is advisable, what is desirable, and what we would tick and vote for, as opposed to the real market situation right now. There's a bit of a schism there.
Yeah, I mean, I take your point, but I think that might come into what is this bare minimum health and safety requirement, you know, and how simple is that? Is it like egress and smoke detectors, you know, like something like that, right? Because then it's really, we don't want anybody living in a space that doesn't have a smoke detector and proper window egress. You know what I mean? Like really they shouldn't be. Other things like mold and floor space and, you know, all sorts of other stuff. Does the kitchen function, you know, all that kind of stuff. You know, I hear you. We don't want to eliminate it, but I also, we don't want people living in unsafe conditions.
Well, given the amount of time it would probably take to think through all of the issues here, if we're doing that and concurrently there actually is movement on additional rentals on the island, then I feel less challenged by the potential loss of 20 suites if we've got a whole bunch coming on the streets that are reasonable.
Basically 50 plus in the pipeline.
Yeah, and that 20 was just purely hypothetical.
So Daniel, what do you need from us today? I assume this was just a bit of you needed a first blush, right? Like you just kind of wanted our reactions.
I mean, I think what I'm hearing maybe is what you're saying is like, for, you sort of recommend.
Do you want me to get that computer going and do a big list like we did last time?
Sure.
So it's gonna take me a sec to transfer over.
Okay.
But I mean, like, the big picture I think what I'm hearing is that we need for like staff to develop almost like what are the standards for, legalizing existing suites, and that needs to be developed before thinking about then like whether it be a suite registry or a business license.
I think so. Like, what's that bare minimum?
Yeah.
Because if it really is like, and again, I get it. It's probably from the municipality's point of view, you have liability as well, right? Like if you've reviewed something and said, yep, it's good enough, and it's not, I get it, right? Yeah. So I think you maybe have to do that work to decide really what is that bare minimum that you can feel comfortable accepting, and then bring that kind of back to everybody, and then say, do we even try or not? Because if it ends up being this huge list and you really can't go shorter than that, then I think it's a different conversation as opposed to if you say, okay, it's these two things. Yeah.
And because almost in terms of my worry about losing suites and people is more like, we have a standard that's like, you need sprinklers and you need to get out and you need whatever fires, and if somebody says, okay, I don't want to do it, then we're like, okay, well maybe that's not a suite that we want that's going to be safe. Like if he was the landlord, say, well, I don't want to bother putting smoke alarms. Maybe not. And I worry more about losing the ones that would be, they're 91 square meters, they're too big, and you say, well, you can do it, but you need to do a variance. And you say, well, I don't want to do a variance. That seems like a lot of hassle. I'm just going to close my suite down. Like those are the ones I don't want to lose.
Agreed. But the ones that don't have smoke detectors and don't have windows for egress, and those are the ones that we probably want to not keep.
I'm just looking at the comparator communities stuff tracked down. It actually is across the board. No requirement for a business license and secondary suites.
Can I ask a question? I think to Michael's point, how doesn't the fire department just inspect the whole building, whether it's a secondary suite or not?
They inspect commercial buildings.
Yeah, but not existing houses. Like nobody
If
comes
you
to
do a
my
house
house every
on
day.
They come to my house.
What are you doing?
I was gonna say, like,
when they came to my house, they went to the fireplace.
No, that's true. I can remember when we first moved in 2006. Mr. Biddlecombe, fire chief, came, and we had to buy an asbestos sort of plank which meant to sit in front of our sealed fireplace.
So that may be like part of your fireplace, right? But isn't that now you get like a
with insurance, a wet inspection, with your
Yeah,
insurance and
wet
stuff.
inspection.
So maybe
that's
the fire department.
It was the fireplace. Yeah, it was Clark. Yeah, he just came over and checked out the
that was
fireplace.
2006 when we moved in.
But was that
This
the
was-
fire department, or was
Yeah.
that a person doing a wet inspection?
It was Clark, so he works for wasn't he the fire chief? He was coming up to be the fire chief.
But is that a regular thing, or that was a once?
2004. I guess it was just once.
Yeah, whereas like you're talking about commercial buildings,
Oh, that's
it's
repeat.
like annual or semi-annual, right?
This is a once-off.
Whereas that might have been a once-off to do with your fireplace, so just as far as I
Yeah, or
understand,
new
the standard house on Bowen that exists now
Yeah.
does not get any kind of inspection unless there's a complaint. The only inspections happen at building permits, or if, I presume if there's a complaint, right, if
Or a
somebody.
purchase or something?
But even then, the city doesn't look at it, the municipality doesn't look at it, you get a building inspector,
You hire
or sorry, an
somebody to
own
come in and do
Yeah.
it.
a home
Okay.
inspector
Yeah.
to do an
Whichever
inspection. But that's at your choice.
Yeah.
But no, the building inspector only goes to look at things that have permits and that presumably get a complaint against them, right? So now-
Insurers, though, now are different because we've just reinsured here, like I'm sure like many others, and now it's taking an awful long time. But the insurance, they said they'd like the insurance inspector to come around, and we thought, really, this is like our sixth or this is our 12th reinsurance or 14th reinsurance, and now they want to come and have a look. Really? You think we've moved it down the road?
And that happened to us at year 12 of 15.
Did it?
Yeah.
Okay, so anyway, I'm still waiting, by the way. This is not a rush, obviously. So, in some ways, you're a house owner, you have insurance, I have to presume, and those insurance companies now are getting quite retentive about having properties conform to their standards, and I'm just wondering how the insurance people might be, through the property insurance, we could achieve some of these objectives.
Well, can we add it, I don't want to spend
No.
too much time on this, but I think insurance is a consideration and how that works, so I think it's just something to take under advisement. If that would meet, you know what I mean, if truly our interest is public safety, if we accept that home insurance might take care of it, so municipalities out of it, do you know what I mean? If that's a consideration, if you
So
choose
do you want this
go
to
that
be
way.
like we're supporting or not supporting, or do you want to just not make that statement right now and just say we have these comments?
I think it's just comments at the moment,
Just
it's not
comments,
I don't think there's a
Right.
definitive, yes, we should do it, no, we shouldn't, it's
Okay.
things to be considered.
Provide.
Yeah, but Robyn, is it true that we don't support business license for one suite?
I'm not personally prepared to say that. Do you? I know you are.
Well,
So
I
you're
kind
not
of-
in favor
I
of
kind
it.
of am, yeah, because I think that the dividing it between the registry, which has lower requirements.
So can I think we should just write that a consideration should be made as to whether it should be a license or a simpler registry.
Yeah, because I mean, that could be in like our business license bylaw is there, but you could make a secondary section in our business license bylaw that says,
Yeah.
for a business that's renting a secondary suite or a single family home or something, you need to do this, and it's a $25 fee or something, like it doesn't,
Yeah.
if the name's an issue, that's one thing, but if it's like the requirement,
Does that
that can somehow end up in the business license bylaw.
No?
No, consideration should be made whether to distinguish. Should be made whether to distinguish between a business license. Does that make sense? Because I don't think we have a definitive one way or the other at the moment.
Okay.
Staff should consider the bare minimum health and safety requirements that would be acceptable for a suite.
Does they have to work there to be in it?
The minimum? Sorry,
Could be the minimum.
So maybe
And
take
they
a
want
word
you to
bare.
dot a little.
Yeah, it sounds a bit.
Bare
minimum.
Bare minimum, sorry. The minimum health and safety requirements for a suite. And that those should be considered when making this decision.
Maybe not consider, but identify.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Identify.
Because there's a
Good word.
suggestion of
Yeah.
recommending.
Yeah, so they should identify the minimum health and safety standard for a suite, and those should be considered in the decision making.
It may be
Or whether to
worthwhile to
license.
get an opinion from the fire department.
Yeah, agreed. So, staff should consult the building inspector and the fire department?
Should, they're
Yeah.
very costly.
Yeah.
Staff.
We
should-
recommend?
Staff should.
Well,
Yeah.
Well, these are-
whatever,
these are
phrase it
comments.
differently, comments, yeah.
Okay.
Staff should consult the fire department and the building inspector when, to identify these minimums.
We'll
or
come in
something
to
like
say
that.
staff should, in consultation.
Yeah, sure, I'm happy with that, in consultation.
Well, and how they would, if the fire department would propose how they can easily.
Well, and I
deal
think it
with
would be a
that.
discussion for them,
Yeah.
between the fire department and the building inspector, like how would that, I think,
But I don't think it's just identifying the minimum requirements, which is fine,
Yeah.
it's point one and point two.
so how about, I wrote this down, a strategy for compliance.
Yeah,
So, staff should identify a strategy for compliance.
Or a couple, didn't you say there were 2 paths to go by?
Sure, I
So
can mention those.
one or two?
A strategy for compliance,
To encourage compliance?
2-tiered or 3-tiered?
staff should identify a strategy to encourage, well, I
Or
think
to
what
ensure?
you're saying, and I'm saying, it's more like, so it's one thing to identify the minimum, and then it's another thing to figure out how in the world you would begin to enforce that.
Yeah.
And have people comply. So a strategy for,
A compliance strategy?
compliance strategy, or enforcement strategy.
Compliance
And enforcement strategy / whatever. Again, these are just comments, right? They're not
and/or.
and/or enforcement strategy. And I think what we're thinking is it the fire department, is it the building inspector, is it, you know, how is that working? Another one I want to touch on, well, do you have it written down, that idea? I don't know that we have to put it formally in the comments of like looking at pre-2008 buildings and post-2008
I think it's
whatever.
a good comment to record.
Do we want to?
Let's do it,
Okay,
yeah,
so, consider compliance path options. Consider compliance path options for, I'm gonna just say pre-2008 buildings versus 2008 and onward.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? And you can fudge
Yeah.
the numbers if there's a difference.
Like I was just looking, City of Vancouver has it distinctly, they say, yeah, it was built before January 2nd, 2001.
Yeah, it was like the date that was,
Different,
yeah, exactly, and they have a lot of those.
Yeah,
2008 was the legalization of secondary suites?
yeah, that's,
Yes.
that's there, I know what it means.
Huh?
That's, it's just like that, I don't know what it means.
Yeah.
That's good.
Okay. And then another comment was, any registry of secondary suites should not be public. Do you know what I mean? Privacy should be considered, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think that's just an important point to put across.
So I think it ends up with like our current business license bylaw application has like this box, it's like you can tick and you won't be listed.
Okay,
We won't include
great.
you, you're still like, it's still FOIable, so somebody submitted FOI
Okay.
requests and said, I wanna see all the
Right.
secondary suite things, we would.
So I almost
So-
feel like if
yeah.
it's a secondary suite one, it should be the reverse.
Yeah.
It should be by
Automatic
default
not.
private,
Yeah.
and then you tick if you, for some reason, wanted to
Yeah.
advertise it, but I just as long as it's in there.
Yeah.
And I think that's good for the public to know that all of a sudden they're not gonna be like listed on some database that anyone can look up their house address
Yeah.
and stuff. Is there anything else that we had in here? And maybe just, overall, that the,
Well, Michael's had quite a point about one versus more than one. We keep circling back to that. Does
Well,
anybody-
yes, the question is, if you have more than one, it's obviously a business.
yeah,
Now, the question for discussion more is
Yeah.
if you just have one in your own home in which you live, is that a business? Question mark.
well, I think that's what the whole discussion is about, right?
But, yeah, worth capturing the yelling
Worth
threshold
capturing.
for needing a business license.
Okay.
I think what Michael is saying is that should any kind of requirements, any requirements exist for a single rental suite in a single family home?
That's another question.
Yeah.
But that's the
that's the
first question, because if council says, for well, yeah, we don't want to address anything single suites, then the whole thing is out of the window anyway.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think that's it's a key decision, which in my mind, we've heard all the discussion about it, but I think council would instantly go into the discussion anyway, because that's the first.
So how about, considerations should be made for a single home that's occupied by the owner, right? Like, a single owner occupied home with a single suite versus
No,
somebody
I think
who.
the question is,
who-
should it be, right, for council? I guess.
Well, yeah, considerations
Whether to,
should be made, or, do you know what I mean? I'm trying to get this versus that, and they should be treated differently,
Yeah, because then
right?
they start with the similar discussions we have
Yeah.
here, and then, somehow something will come out of it.
Yeah,
Single
home
suite.
with a single suite versus a
I
land,
say and. so that's-
okay, and a landlord managing multiple properties. Does that
So that,
make
but-
sense?
Yeah, but it is, so that's just the scenario, business license or no business license, right?
Okay,
And then we, as the housing committee, have said, well, there may be something in between, which is the registry, right? So I think that what you just wrote should be kind of at the top.
okay, so we
That's the
should put
first
that
thing.
point first.
Yeah, like, is there an exclusion for suites in one suite in one house, or does it mean that they have to be registered?
Maybe there, second to top, or the very top?
I think the very top,
Okay.
and then the next one is the business license
Okay.
versus suite registry. Okay.
But I mean, I think like the other stuff, even if council says, okay, it's not, like if it's owner occupied secondary suite, doesn't need business license, the other issues about compliance and stuff still come up for other, so I know like.
Yeah, that's why
others.
the registry then will
Yeah.
Yeah.
come up.
Yeah.
Right? There's still a requirement, but I think it's kind of following the same,
Yeah,
the same discussions we did, right? So
Yeah.
the board's gonna follow
Yeah.
that.
Okay.
yeah.
Could that be reworded?
Yeah, everything,
Consideration should be made for eligibility for a license or registry.
Gosh.
And then cut all that stuff up regarding whether to distinguish. And then it's for an owner occupied.
and then we went over versus and again.
And then or a landlord. No,
So should be for eligibility for license.
that's still not quite right,
Not
but it's
quite right.
closer.
Would it be requirement for a license or registry?
Yeah, rather than eligibility.
And is it really more the question of whether we treat them differently?
Yeah.
Is that what we're getting at?
Yeah.
So maybe consideration should be made whether to treat single, do you know what I mean? Single or landlords, multiple properties differently. Like, is that enough? Just, because we kind of want to
Yeah.
keep it clear, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So say whether to treat, and then just delete everything up to an owner occupied, yeah, so keep an owner, yeah. So consideration should be made whether to treat an owner occupied home as single suite differently from,
Yeah.
yeah, so suite differently from
That's good.
Perfect.
a landlord. Yeah, I think that captures what we're talking
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
That should we make, should there be a distinction between those two? And then consideration should be made whether to distinguish between license and suite registry, I think that
makes
makes the
sense.
point. We should, staff should identify minimum health and safety requirements for a suite in consultation with the fire department building inspector, and those should be, those requirements should be considered in decision-making. I think that's kind of, yeah, that's fine.
Sorry, and
And
then
those, yeah, exactly,
those-
requirements. Just again, because I think that is a fact, like if the municipality comes up with a list of 20 things that are the minimum, that they can't say less, then it might just be that we say, nope, we don't even touch single homes with single suites, because it's just too, we just don't wanna go there. But if they come up with a list of 3 that we think, you know what, that's actually pretty reasonable for anybody to do, that might be a factor in, do you know what I mean? Is that
Yeah.
clear?
Yeah.
Okay.
One of the things that Richmond notes in a brochure that they have is that if you are offering lodging, you don't need a business license. So
Okay.
they
So, oh, that's a
explicitly
good
state
point.
that. So if we were to come to the conclusion that a single-family
These are just my notes.
owner-occupied home with one suite doesn't need it. I mean, there is, you know, that bit of a precedent in another
Yeah.
community. Just carving out, this is like, we don't need it, you know, for these folks.
So should we make note of that, that we don't, because I think also if you're renting out a room to a roommate, or, I
Yeah.
don't think that's not what we're
Oh,
talking
yeah.
about, right? So is that lodging, is that the correct?
That's what they called it
Term?
in
Does
Richmond.
that-
I don't know if it's.
Well,
Lodging-
I thought it's like a room. thing, like-
Lodging is a very generic term. I mean, even
Yeah.
the hotel industry is sometimes referred to as a lodging
Yeah,
industry.
well,
It's
they define it as
it's a-
renting a room.
very broadly
Because
applied
then you're
word.
not, like if you're renting a room, you're not a, like it's not a residential
You're not a
tenancy
tenant.
act.
Yeah.
You fall outside of that, you just, yeah,
Yeah.
it's all different about it, it's not.
So do we want to just make a point that we don't see roommate situations, someone renting a room falling into this category?
City of Vancouver says if you're renting a secondary suite to family, You can define it, that that's not a business license, but if you're into somebody else, it is.
They make a distinction.
Yeah, like you're
Lodging, and maybe
recommending
put in
3K or
brackets,
something,
room
yeah.
dates,
Interesting.
should not be
How do they
considered in this.
I know, right?
You know, enforce all of this.
Because then you do it, and then, well, then you're
Secondary
getting it out to
suites or-
somebody else.
No,
Not
could not
included,
be,
not being included.
should not be included in this discussion. Oh,
I don't know, won't say this or thing.
okay, lodging unit should not be included, in the consideration for business licenses. Okay.
Do we want to say something about insurance? Because we've talked quite a lot about insurance, and some of it's, you know, anecdotal, but
So,
it might be important to, a better
staff,
grasp.
insurance, what did we say? I don't want to say.
Regulations should be clarified,
Mm.
or
What do we want to say? We
Implications?
basically want to say that we should consider, we staff, I don't know, should consider the role of the insurance, home ownership insurance in safety
Yeah.
of dwellings.
Okay.
Consider the role of homeowner insurance in the safety of dwellings, something along those lines.
not just homeowner, tenant insurance, just home
Insurance, home insurance, okay.
Home insurance.
Consider
Say something.
the role of home insurance in safety of dwelling units. Something like that?
I don't understand that one. I think that we
Okay.
just have to say, I mean, I don't think we should get involved in the implications of insurance. I mean, you can just remind people that they have to have insurance. But I don't
Well,
know.
no, I think the point that Michael was saying is that
So, just-
home insurers takes some role in ensuring the safety of dwelling unit. They don't probably meet the same as a building inspector. But what you're saying is, and again, this is kind of, as a community, if somebody has home insurance, you trust that their dwelling is reasonably safe, does the municipality need to have a role in overseeing? So it's like, if you decide that the role, the line is, nope, we're not touching single-family homes with secondary suites, like, we're not even just gonna go there, because we're gonna trust that homeownership insurance.
The only thing that the insurance company does is they assess their risk. And their risk can be a fireplace. It could be anything.
Yeah.
It could be old piping. It could be shitty electrical. It could be whatever, right? That the house is expensive. They just assess their risk. Now, if their risk is, if they go there and there's a suite in there and they think there's a higher risk, well, then if they visit the house and there's a suite there and they assess that as a high risk, then they ask for a higher premium.
Yeah,
But then all of the insurance companies are different too.
I know.
You know,
So
it's
yeah,
like-
I'm a
I don't
bit-
think you should get into that. It is
Yeah,
more-
that's a bit, I kind of feel that way as well, like that's, because people might not have insurance and that's their choice.
But if
You
the
can't force
municipality
them to.
says we're not going to control safety because it may affect insurance, I
Yeah.
think you can't touch that. It's just like,
Yeah.
from a liability point of view, you can't do that. It's more like how, I mean, Michael may be right that in the end it is council's decision not to proceed with something for that reason.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even write it black and white on paper.
Okay.
As an architect, I wouldn't ever
Yeah.
do something in a paper.
I'm inclined to not include it, but what do other, Michael, Maureen, what?
I think we do need to have a grasp on what happens if we do introduce business licensing for secondary suites. And I mean, that might just be a conversation with, you know, a local insurance company.
Yeah.
You know, how they deal
Sure.
with secondary
So
suites.
could it be staff should investigate, so, or it's like, or what's the right thing? Like, basically, we just want to say, hey, research.
Understand.
Staff
Yeah.
should research and understand the role of home insurance.
Or staff.
Something like that, do you know what I mean?
Staff is-
Yeah.
Well, but like we're just saying,
Yeah, that's-
we
that's what
should,
I'm saying.
yeah.
The other note that Robyn had made was for the CRA, so that's more about like, you know, threshold for a business license.
Right,
Yeah.
it's just, do you want to make that point?
I liked it as a point, because like,
Oh,
I should
okay.
actually figure that out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Should
okay.
we clarify it?
Yeah.
Well, how do we word it then?
It's another research and understand.
Research, okay, so staff, again, I don't wanna like, but staff to research CRA thresholds
It's probably
for
the-
commercial versus.
You know, it's probably the capital gains.
It is, that's exactly what I'm
That's
getting
what
at.
you're talking about. So
No, that's
again,
what I'm getting at. It's just an easy, like, line to delineate, to say, oh, well, this is a standard that another government agency uses. That would be easy for us to apply if we just wanna draw a line
Yeah.
and, Yeah.
And
Definitions?
council will go there.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely certain council will go there. So
Yeah.
being able to answer some basic
Yeah,
questions,
I
I
think-
think would be helpful.
I think
that's
that's
a good
reasonable.
like template for your next
Yeah,
report.
Okay, what you're really saying is that if people get rental income, you don't want them to declare it on an income tax return. Because then the
No.
revenue candidate will probably know that somehow, when you sell your house, that maybe some of it is excluded from the capital gains tax.
No,
Now,
but
that's called
yeah.
tax evasion. Now, if that happens under the radar screen, fair enough, but you can't just go into saying, well,
But
we're
so
afraid that people actually.
From my knowledge, and this is again what you need to research, I don't want to get into
That's not what anyone says here.
No. But from my understanding, that's what I'm getting at, is CRA acknowledges if it's your primary dwelling and it has a secondary suite, you declare the rental income, you do not pay capital gains.
Yeah, okay. Well,
Right?
that's-
If I
that's
move
sure.
out of that house and then rent it to somebody else or rent the suite or whatever, it's considered capital gains. Again, this is just my understanding of it. So there is a very clear line that they've drawn, that if it's your primary dwelling and you rent a secondary suite, you declare the income,
Yes.
but it's not considered capital gains on that property. So it's just, there is a
So it's
line.
like, that could be a rationale for saying,
It's a
this is
rationale.
not a business
So what
license.
you're
Think,
saying-
yeah,
as
that's,
like
well, that's really good.
What you're saying is
Yeah.
upon sale, that part of that square footage of the property is exempt from any.
Well, it's not considered capital
gains.
gains, yeah,
And it is exempt from capital gains taxation.
as is your primary dwelling, right? So, whereas I know from experience when I rented out my condo, when I moved here, by the letter of the law, you're supposed to write a letter to CRA, declare that you have moved out and started renting it,
Yeah.
declare the asset value at the time that you moved out, and then if I move back 10 years later, I have to write to them again and say, I've now moved back in, it's my primary dwelling, here's the value. And if I didn't sell it for another 30 years, that 10-year thing, that gain in value, I have to pay property or capital gains on. In theory. Now, who actually does that, I don't know, but that's the theory. Whereas if I own the house that I'm in now with the secondary suite, and or whatever, again, I rent it out, I could live in it for 30 years, declare the income the entire time, and there's no capital gains, because that's, again, that's my understanding. I'm not a tax expert, but
That's the one.
that's, yeah, and again, I think you're right, it's just a rationale for there's this, everybody's kind of agreed that there's this line, that it's not a commercial, and I think you've got it there, that it's not a commercial venture. It still is your residential one. Okay, I feel like we've really.
No, that's a key point.
Let's move along, I think we've got most of them, the health and have we got it that, yeah, the health and
Yeah.
safety, that's really, maybe we just make one more point to say that from the housing committees, from our point of view, I don't know how you word this,
You can reword it later.
that, you can reword it later, that we want to encourage retention of rental units and ensure health and safety of those units. That's kind of our overarching point.
Yeah.
Is keep as many rental units as we can and make sure they're health and safety, minimum health and safety requirements, so. I'd almost put that first, so, yeah.
Like
And I think
how do you
that's-
maximize both of those? And,
Yeah, and find the balance between those two. Okay?
Can I ask a question? Are there like anecdotal reports of mold and fire danger around the island?
Mold,
Right
I
now.
have heard, I haven't
Yeah.
directly heard fire safety issues, but it wouldn't surprise me. Just Given old houses, I mean, you never know, obviously not serious ones, but even just things like having enough smoke detectors, because by the letter of the, but building code now, you have to have a smoke alarm in every bedroom, and then one in each living space. And I bet a lot of houses don't have that, right? If you were built ages ago, you probably have one in the hallway, near the bedrooms, and that's it. Or maybe, one on per level, whereas now they're required in every bedroom. So those kinds of little things, which is not onerous, but they probably don't need that. And then people replace windows and, do weird things. Like I'm pretty sure my bedroom doesn't comply with egress, because like it's got a fixed window and then it's got this tiny little slider up top, so there's, just little things like the quirky things like that with older houses. Yeah.
But you know, 100% of the houses I lived on in Vaughan had unpermitted suites.
And you lived in every single one of them.
Yeah.
Say that again, Daniel.
Yeah.
100% of the houses I've lived on in Vaughan have unpermitted secondary suites in them.
Yeah.
That's why I don't.
So we don't want you to lose your housing.
So yeah, so you wouldn't be here right now.
Okay, let's move along, So that's our referral done, that's 5.1.
Nope.
Oh,
I need a vote.
we need a vote, sorry, to pass our long list here.
I'll take that as.
Yeah, motion, I'll second, all in favor, yeah, unanimous. Okay, thank you, staff. So 6.1. Okay, where are we at with this? So we have the Secondary Suites Bylaw review versus the Land Use Bylaw. So the Land Use Bylaw, okay, let's start with number 1. Secondary Suites Bylaw review. What's the timeline on that? Because I don't think anything's happened since our last meeting. So,
Well, I mean, luckily, so the goal was to time this with land use bylaw thing. I'd sent the land use bylaw, my report to the APC at their October meeting. And it was the last thing on the agenda, and it was 9:30 at night, and we deferred it to the
It was so
November
late.
meeting.
okay, so we maybe have another month's grace.
Yeah.
Okay, and so the Secondary Suite Bylaw review and the Land Use Bylaw review are, we kind of want to do together?
It seemed convenient. It's not essential, but it's like
Okay.
it's a nice. I thought of it as a nice like driving point too for this.
Yeah, okay. So maybe the best thing, Fritz, do you want to make a time now that
Yeah,
we
I think
could
that-
sit together for,
Yeah, I think so.
okay.
Because kind of the way I thought we should structure it is that I kind of went through as you know, I went to the OCP and the LUB, and I think that just to give that awareness, like what Maureen, what you were saying, is actually take the bylaw, right, and insert, you know.
Yeah, which I think we just about have, like, we're there, that information's
Yeah,
there.
but-
I think we need to just format it and then gives a bit of a rationale. I think that was what
Yes.
was missing from the points that we
Yes,
had.
but I'd like to do that with it isn't the biggest deal, actually. OCP is it's so obvious, right, that some of these things don't meet the current objectives. To do that for the OCP, which as a draft, right, and then I can prepare that for our meeting.
Okay,
Because I
Sure.
almost have that done anyway.
Yeah.
And then for the LUB, I did it. Identify the things that I thought should be addressed, but more go through it as a summary, what are the key parts, right? And then I kind of wondered, because I originally thought that the report to council should give the rationale and some examples, and then maybe attach the whole, document to it, which has yellow marked everything that should be considered for to be redefined, to be but it takes, I don't think it's really the most difficult thing to do. If we set it up, then.
yeah, I think it just needs a little bit
So I
of,
can prepare for that, but if you have a meeting, let's say, maybe not next week, but maybe 2 weeks.
that's what I thought, if we did 2 weeks, do you want to do, what's your timing, like, do you want to do like a Friday morning, or like, do you want to try and do an evening?
Friday morning is kind of okay with me.
Okay, why don't we just do that, why don't we just kind of do, sorry to take up committee time, but
I think it's
that's
better,
gonna
as long
happen.
as you guys make it happen.
I know,
right?
it's
Yeah.
5 minutes.
Multitask, yeah.
It's a condition.
I think it's the best way of moving this
I
section.
think so.
Yeah. So let's just plan to meet at 9 AM and we'll figure out where, in the on the 15th, if that works.
Sullivan, I your first choice, but I'm out of the office that day. You can always use my office as a meeting place.
Okay.
Yeah. Channel you.
And watch the fairies.
Okay,
So is it the 15th?
the 15th at 9
What
AM?
time?
9?
Yeah,
Does that work?
Yeah.
And why don't we just say we'll meet in Daniel's office, and if we want to meet somewhere else, we can figure that
Yeah.
out. And if anybody else wants to
There's
join
nowhere
us,
else to meet, so.
okay. If anybody wants to join us, you can, and then I'll just sit with my laptop and we'll probably just work through.
And this story, is this gonna be for the secondary suites and the land use bylaw?
Yeah.
Or just,
Yeah,
okay.
that's the idea. Okay, just sit.
And
They
then-
might just be a single document, but we'll make sure, I would just make sure the single suite, their secondary suites is like a just separate part, so it's just a 1-pager or whatever. That's easy for council to look at, and then if the rest of it's a little more,
So,
a little thicker,
so this would come back to this
This
committee
committee.
in
Yeah.
December,
December.
and then Danielle, when would the other feedback come from APC? I'm trying to get a sense of when this comes
Yeah.
to council.
So it would either be, so APC is on the 18th of November, so it's like either I'd be bringing it to the meeting or more realistically the first January meeting of the council, so that would match.
great. So action moving forward on that one. So that's 6.1, 6.2. And then 6.3, which we added, is just an update on the Rent Smart. We're proposing to do a further landlord workshop because there was so much interest on November 30th. So if you want to let people know, I've just put it out briefly on the Facebook, everything else. We contacted the wait list. We've got, I think, 4 people registered now. So we'll give it a couple weeks, see if a few more people sign up. And then I think if at only 4, we probably wouldn't run. We'll check with Tess what she wants to do. But we may not run it, and then we defer to, I think we're gonna do a tenant one, end of January, beginning of February. I can't remember if the date's been set.
February 1st.
February 1st, okay.
I think.
Yeah, I think so. Let me see what the.
Does Sophie know about this additional session?
We should put it on the Muni News or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, that might be, sorry, because I just haven't got around to the promotion side of things, so, since we've got a month, it's probably good timing now.
Yeah.
Do you want me to do that?
I have to check with her on something.
Okay,
today,
so
I'll
Maureen will
just-
do that. Maureen,
So you said the tenant session is early February,
February 1st is the next tenant session.
and is there a landmark session?
We don't have one scheduled for the new year. I think, let's see how this, November 30th, if it happens or not.
Okay.
And then we might schedule another one later on.
That's the wrong date for the tenant session.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, I'll just find it.
Oh, okay, I had it down as the first, but.
Robyn, do you know if the
Oh, it is the
landlord
first.
session?
Yeah, sorry.
Did you track like who are current landlords and who were like prospective landlords?
I think that we had an evaluation thing at the end, and I think it did say, I think it did actually.
I'm just thinking, because if we do one in November, maybe in the new year at some point, we follow up with people and say like, what were your experiences and are you now renting? Because it might be nice to say. If, like,
Yeah, it
we
might be
did it,
nice,
and now
so-
some of the people are now renting, we're thinking about it.
Most of them
Questions, yeah.
had some experience as landlords previously, and some were current landlords. But I recall there was one, well, there were 2 people at least who were thinking about it.
Okay, so yeah, I wasn't at that one, but the questions that are asked in the
Yeah.
evaluation are, how many units do you own or manage? And
Okay,
so
yeah.
we'll have the
Yeah,
numbers
yeah.
there, and then how long have you been that, been a landlord, property manager? And then it sort of says, what was your knowledge and comfort before the course and after the
Okay,
course, so
yeah.
if we see an improvement? And then, how likely you, and then there was some sort of top 3 points of what you're looking for, which is useful as well. You know, paying rent on time, being quiet, you know, those general things, but good to know. So yeah, it might be maybe after we have the second session, or several months later, like you say, did this, we could probably identify, well, these are anonymous actually, so we won't know, but yeah, maybe just put out a little evaluation to say, hey, did this make any changes, did that course make any changes for you, that kind of thing. Okay. But yeah, so far, I mean, I think it's been well received. I hope we get a little more uptake on the tenant one in the new year, and I think we can just try to push and advertise that a bit more, and certainly from Birch's point of view, we'll be making it sure to know that everybody, you know, will highly recommend that anybody who wants to apply to live in the Birch housing, you know, will take the Rent Smart kind of program, that kind of thing, so try to get some more people out.
Are you continuing to record listings? I know you were doing that for a while. Any recent observations, any change?
No, other than maybe just going up a little bit. You know, there's been some single detached 2-bedroom dwellings that are like over $2,000, which I feel is very high, but that's the market, right? Whereas before 2 bedrooms were generally under 2,000, you know what I mean, and 3 bedrooms were kind of over, whereas now I've started to see the 2-bedroom, again, freestanding kind of, you know, nicer ones. But no, other than, I do just keep track, just so you guys know, so we have some stats if anyone's interested. For about a year, I did kind of last summer to this summer, just on my own, on basically just our Facebook page and on Bowen, or if I saw them anywhere else, I would track the unit type and the, like I just take a screenshot basically, and then we put it into a spreadsheet. And so I continue to do that. Whenever I see a listing, I just screenshot it, and then at some point we'll do another data dump and just kind of keep track. So it's really the only rental data we have for prices on Bowen.
Yeah.
So I'll just keep tracking it and
Your own personal municipality.
yeah. but it's helpful for us, right? Because we're gonna, depending on which funding we go after and all that stuff, we're gonna have to know what is market rent on Bowen, and if we have to be a prescribed percentage below or whatever. And again, this will give us data if we don't wanna use BC rates or lower, you know what I mean? If there's some argument to be made that we don't wanna be lumped in with this, I can say, hey, we've actually got this data, these are what our rental rates are. So it's just kinda having that in our back pocket. Okay, so that's the Rent Smart update. I could actually, sorry, this is not on the agenda, but I could, new business, I could give you a really, are you all up to date on Birch, or should we, I don't wanna jump into the.
Did I include them as an information item?
No.
Sorry, that's.
No, that's okay. More just if people are curious. So, Birch got funding from CMHC, seed funding, and a top up from Van City. So we got about almost $55,000 for this next round, which is schematic design, and we're hiring the architects. So it's out with them now. So we'll, we put out an expression of interest, and they're coming in the next week or two, and in November, probably end of November, we'll have chosen an interview, last 2 weeks of November, and we'll have them chosen, and then hopefully, depending on their timing, schematic design complete, March, I'm wishful thinking, but sometime March, April, and that should line up with the subdivision process, which is also a bit of a hang up for all the funders. So once the subdivision's complete, there's actually a lot, and then we have a schematic design, I think we're in a really great position to apply for next rounds of funding. So we'll see what that looks like. And at this housing conference I'm going to, actually, Maureen, if I find out, maybe we could go together. I'm hoping to have a one-on-one with CMHC. They offered that as a session. And so I really want to talk to them about, can CMHC and BC Housing, can we all talk? Because they have money and CMHC has money. And I just found out, I think Metro Vancouver might have some money. So it's like, can we all get together and agree that this needs to be built? And if everybody puts in a little bit, and we all agree on some, criteria that meets, some level, because it's very hard. BC Housing has a very particular criteria, and CMHC, the feds have a very particular criteria, and they don't really mesh. So it's sort of, can we all just talk and work something out? So that's kind of what I hope for. But that's probably maybe a bit over-optimistic.
Oh, that sounds great.
We'll see. We'll see what we can do. So yeah, that's where we're at with Birch. So it's ticking along.
Have you heard anything more, Robyn, like BC Housing funding schedule?
I'm expecting there'll be an announcement at this conference. This Housing Central conference is huge. It's like 1,500 delegates. It's like BC and Western Canada. So I think they've made announcements there before. So I'm kind of expecting they'll make an announcement. This the program has kind of an announcement time slot. And what it is, I don't think it'll be like I think it'll be a modification of the previous program. Like from what our consultants have said, they're kind of expecting they'll up the capital. Like right now it's 100,000 per unit that you get, and they're finding that doesn't work for most projects. So they might be upping, say for example, upping the amount, or maybe just tweaking things, because I think they've been struggling for the last year or two, making the numbers work for all of these. Like certainly our numbers don't work for their program. So yeah, so hopefully we'll know in a couple weeks if there's some change.
Do you remember last time how long they gave? Because I remember it closed September. I was trying to remember when they announced. Yeah, it was good. They announced it in June. And
I feel like it maybe was that, but I think people knew about it. Do you know what I mean? Like it's the same thing. Like everybody they announce it, they know about it, and then they officially open it, and you've probably got like a few months to maybe get it. And I can't remember the exact, but people have been talking about spring, but I don't know if that's accurate or if it'll be next September. But hopefully
I'm more just trying to think about like our subdivision timing and your timing, right? And like
like if it ends up being like March 15th, we're gonna be tight. But so we'll just see.
Yeah, and it'd be nice if they announced like June, and then we're like.
Then it would be. Then we'd have a little bit more time. But okay, so sorry, that was not on the agenda. A little Birch update there. But I think we're kind of doing okay for time, so we're all right. The 7.1 is the housing study update.
Sure, so this is the for the housing assessment. So we received 7 responses for our EOI, and so myself and Maureen and Michael reviewed, and we selected Urbanics as the consulting firm to do it.
Great.
Okay, you that's
Yeah, and so we had them adjust their time, or I had them adjust their timing to that the original submission had all the consultation taking place in December. So we're going to flag that as not a great time. So flag it, so they're starting the consultation in the new year, and looking to do the data analysis November, December start. So.
Great. So they're still going to be on schedule for February?
So it'll be like in March.
March.
Yeah, I think reviewed, and I think partly it was that their completed studies that they had done were sort of the most detailed, I would say, in terms of like recommendations that came out of it. Yeah, I think they look less polished, but were more like substantial recommendations. Some of the other ones I felt like you got very slick ones, and you're like, but when you looked at a bunch of the other ones they did, you're like, huh, they seem to like, we recommend these 5 things.
Right.
And
File,
like,
save as.
Like, yeah. So I was
Right.
like, oh, I could just read those and steal those anyways. Maybe we should do these. So,
Right.
So like, yeah, I didn't really want a report that said, use municipal land for affordable housing and
Right.
prioritize affordable housing applications or something. It's like, okay, I'll just do that.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
good. But
So
yeah, good
we're hoping-
response. Oh,
Yeah, good
7
response.
responses.
Yeah.
That's great.
It is
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, so hopefully they're starting, and I think in the schedule we have meetings with the housing advisory committees, which will be coming.
Great.
We'll look for it.
Excellent. Okay, and then the last item is the work plan check-in and discussion re 2020 work plan.
Oh, my favorite item.
I read already.
Should put it at the top of the agenda for when everyone's tired.
Yeah. So page 13. Yeah, I was actually looking at this in the agenda, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, these have changed.
We're just getting ready for the new one.
Well, yeah, exactly, sort of, I think, do we want to just take 5 minutes and we'll maybe just tick through, see what's done, what's obsolete, and then maybe kind of just flag for consideration to carry forward kind of thing. Does that make sense? So like the housing needs assessment, big tick, done. Like, that's not really, I mean, that's out of our hands. Looking at some of the sub-points there, the housing matrix, I actually, to be honest, this is completely dropped off my radar. I can't even remember, so.
It was Steve, and then he,
Yeah, so I'll just kind of circle that and see if we can look back at what that is, or if we finished it, or if it needs to be carried forward.
I think we'll get that out of the housing needs.
The housing needs assessment.
It's basically the projection of types of
Yes.
housing units
Yeah.
that are required based
Yeah,
on needs.
okay, so done.
I think the only interest,
Well, off our plate,
the
right?
interest will be only in maybe fishing this out when we've got the official and see.
Yeah, okay. And then, actually, getting the information from surveys, so we had the Birch survey. We also had, I really liked, because I read the report that you did on the business licensing and how many employees there were. So there was numbers about full year employees, numbers about seasonal employees, like that's super helpful. There's like 650 year-round employees and like 225 seasonal. I thought that was really interesting. So we don't need that. And then the Bowen specific information, I think that'll come from the needs assessment, but maybe we'll check in on that. And provincial needs assessment requirements, that's done, and yeah, so I mean, all that's on its way outside of our jurisdiction here. The development process, I feel like that's maybe something to consider to carry forward, because I don't think we've really looked at that this year. The short-term rental bylaw update, that's happening, so it's like in progress. With, we're getting feedback on that. Number 4, financial tools, I think we can consider that to carry forward. But the MRDT, I think, has been recommended to move forward. And then number 5, identify challenges and barriers. I think that's probably just a good one to revisit and potentially carry forward for 2020. So just kind of, we can look at that and do our next session. And then number 6, find housing solutions. So I feel like this is in progress. Engage and explore solutions. So we can maybe look at that. Like some of it's complete, some of it can be carried forward. The speaker series, we can kind of revisit what we want that to look like maybe in 2020. Research best practices, engage with the community. That's another thing we can consider, and explore solutions. Yeah.
Could we look at the island plan and the section that relates to housing? Because the work plan sort of makes its way into the island plan.
Yeah.
And just to check and see what we've done and haven't done.
Okay.
That this year.
Do you remember where
It's page 8.
oh my.
So it's in our interest to make sure that the language we want to see is reflected in the next island plan, which will be worked on in December and January. So the first one there is the formal housing needs assessment, so that's great, we'll have it. The barriers to housing and diversity, I mean, that's basically the work that Fritz has been doing.
This report.
You've been doing, so we've done that. We haven't done a catalog of potential sites for housing on public land, but I'm wondering if that is something that is useful to do, and if it is useful to do, how much work would be in it?
You know, what's interesting about that if you go back to the OCP, right?
Mhm.
And if you would say from, if you look at them first separately, where would you believe there's opportunity based on how people think about the island today?
Right,
And then you compare it with what actually is allowed for the OCP, right?
right.
So then you probably realize that the OCP doesn't allow most of that for this community plan. So what I think will come up here a little bit is that I know it's difficult for a community to do that, but to rethink a little bit how development should be allocated on this island. Because at the moment, a lot of things that council wants to do don't meet OCP. At a certain point, it will just come out as it's not supposed to work like that. And from a legal point of view,
But,
So,
but
but
this is specifically about public land.
Yeah.
So
yes, but
it's,
the public land is not distinguished in the
OCP?
No, it isn't. So like if you, for instance, would say, but I don't know if that actually you should first go to what is actually the intent, the objective, right? And then how can you realize that? And maybe it's easier to realize in public land. You see what I mean? It's more like that.
right,
But so I mean, there's some bigger issues. Like, you know, if you see that of course Daniel is fully aware of it, but if you realize how much the OCP is not encouraging what we do here, it's only the OCP has two distinct parts to it. One part is to make everything work in Snuggle Village, which is actually still very current. The other part is not current. You know, how does it affect and relate to the rest of the island?
Yeah. Well, we'll look at that in
Yeah.
our report.
right.
I wonder if that one, is this the work that the mayor's standing committee is doing? Because they're really looking at the public, the community land, right? I don't know that they're looking through a lens of housing, but I would hope that that's included in their work.
I mean, it could be to
Right, you're on
respond.
both, you're on
Yeah, I
both
was going to
sides.
say, like, I find it still very much focused actually on the community lands.
Yeah.
And if something is,
But isn't that what we're
specific-
talking about when you say public land? Like what?
8.3.
well, there's more public
Yeah.
land than the community lands, I guess, right?
Not much more.
Well, it depends what you call public
Community
land.
lands is the,
You talk,
Like in terms of municipal
I talk
land,
municipal
it's
land,
not
or like,
that's
we got
fully
like
private.
tons of crown land, for
I'm
instance.
talking
Oh,
about
I see what
municipal
you mean.
land.
So is it more like, yeah,
No, it was not intended
it's
to
intended to be
encompass
municipal.
crowd.
Start
Like,
taking
I see
apart,
this as
but
being
that's
like,
like, ah.
You know, how much
I don't
easier
think we
would
wanna go there.
Birch's life have been if we'd had, you know, if all our community lands were created and there was a lot, and we're
Yeah.
like, oh look, this one's right here and it's zoned for 20 and the servicing of this will cost you this much to develop and like just.
Yeah. Like if
Right,
we,
to do that.
because we're working away on this one,
Right.
but if the community was working away and said, hey, we actually have this great site on this other bit, we think that should be Birch's next project. So once you're done with that one, then we'll start develop, you know, like if it was already pre-identified, subdivided, created as a lot, do you know what I mean? Like that would make, or any other housing provider, it doesn't have to be Birch, any other housing provider, that would make things significantly
You
easier.
know, I mean, through this two-tier zoning or amenity zoning, right, the municipality actually has the tool to create more municipal land. It's just that simple, right? Like if, for instance, if you take get what your curve is, and if you would get 85% of the land, well, that's municipal land,
Mhm.
right? And then if that is seen as providing opportunity, I'm just giving an example, like
Yeah.
through your tools, which are actually the tools that Bowen doesn't use very
Yeah,
much,
yeah.
is this, you know, two-tier
Yeah.
zoning.
I guess I
You
just
can get
kind
that.
of, I kind of want to ground this. Like, this was a goal for this year,
Yeah.
to develop a catalog of potential sites for housing on municipal land. in order to meet that goal for that particular statement, I mean, would it be as simple, could it be as simple, Daniel, as sitting down and just listing, housing on various sites, looking at area, whatever it is,
Yeah.
area 1, and
Like
say,
area 1.
You've got, hey, where is it?
Yeah. Right up there for so long.
And just, laying it out there and pulling in the library lot, because we keep forgetting. And I haven't a clue, can't remember, what is the library lot zoned as?
Civic uses kind of.
Civic uses? So it's not currently zoned for housing or anything?
They may allow a dwelling, maybe, but it's basically the same zoning as Bowen Children's Center and like Kate's Hill and IPS. It's all that same sub-area.
Because I just would like to see even just a page that meets that objective. And I know there are other larger issues to consider, how to increase the amount of municipal land or zoning concerns, but just what do we have now?
Yeah.
So who can do that? Is that full
Yes.
staff, or is that or is it something we as a committee can, I'm just saying, who can achieve that? Does it have to be staff?
Would it wouldn't take much, would it? Or,
I mean, it's something I could do. It's something, that seems like it falls under the mayor's standing committee, and that.
But isn't it like somebody who has, like if you have a land department, for instance, right, in a municipality, they'll have actually know exactly what these costs. You know what I mean? It's just like what's owned by the municipality.
exactly. Yeah.
And I mean, it could be a very, I'm just imagining it visually, that it would just be the community lands, that little map that we have, and just a few arrows that say, because is it looking at potential sites, so it's not the ones that are already allocated, right? So really, there's the remainder of lot 3, there's part of lot 1, and there's a little bit on lot 2. You know what I mean? It wouldn't be too hard to just say, it's this much square footage, or this much area, right? And then I don't know if you can estimate housing units, but you can just say, this is zoned for housing and.
If it gets flipped over to the mayor's standing committee, it basically ends up being Daniel and Frits and me, and maybe another member or two of the committee. So I don't care where it gets done, I just would like to see it done. So there can be a check mark next to that, and it's foundational.
Yeah.
What about those maps you provided for the mayor's committee? Do you remember when it was? I can show them. They're, okay. Do you remember what they're called?
Well, that's all right. If it's a thing for Maureen, and if you guys are okay to, you don't want to
I think
runs.
that somebody in the municipality probably knows what the municipality owns, right? Like if most people from, is it assessed by BC assessment at all? Sort of? Not sort of.
I mean, I'm sure it has an assessed value.
No, like if it's assessed value is 0, is it on their books or not? I mean, at a certain point, every parcel in, every private parcel or parcel that exists is on the registry of the BC Assessment Authority. Right, so they probably, maybe you have to phone them and
No,
they can give you a list. What Bowen Island owns.
So no, I mean, we have records of what we own, and I can provide what it's zoned for,
Okay.
and that are potential. Where it overlaps, I think, with the work of the mayor's standing committee, what's the vision, is the vision for that parcel housing?
No, but it's just a list, right? This is, we're just asking a list of parts of land that is owned by the
Maybe
municipality.
it's as simple as, the community lands, what bits are left that are zoned for housing, you give the area and maybe the FSR if that's applicable.
Here it is.
Do you know what I mean? And it's that simple.
Well, no, I think you should have a complete list, and the reason is that some parcels that we are not thinking about may have different zoning on it. And
Right,
if
that
Maureen
have
knows,
potential.
she may like to rezone it to residential.
Well,
Yeah,
to
fair
your
enough.
point, in terms of getting prepared, I mean, to the point that you made, Robyn, wouldn't it be, this project's finished now, wouldn't it be great if it didn't have to go through the same dramas as you did on the...
And to some extent, we've done some of that work already. We've even pre-zoned a good chunk of the community lands already. But sort of looking through the lens of potential housing, I think is a slightly different task
Yeah.
than what's been done here. I'm happy to work with you on it and if I can
Okay.
help.
Great.
So
In the meantime, Fritz, there are these 3 documents that are not really exactly the same. These are the 3 community lands.
Yes, so step to go to the next page. So this is just saying like lot 1, and I know that oh no, sorry.
There.
Yeah, but then if you just go to the next page of that PDF.
Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
That's when I just list, like, this is what it's zoned for, is
Yeah.
all that I prepared for
Does that help
initially.
for now?
To say, this is the
Well,
land.
no, but I think what I hear Marine say, which makes sense to me, is that there may be land elsewhere that is
Right.
just radar screen.
Yeah.
And so if you just look at all the land use bylaw on it, and maybe has some zone on it that is outdated, we want to change, you can go through that exercise, but like, we don't know.
So
exactly.
really, Fritz, I mean, it's the old library lot.
And that's it.
Yeah, that's
But
what
like,
we want.
the other land that we own is either, I mean, I guess it's like current fire hall site. If new fire
Right.
hall gets built,
That's a
would be
good- yeah.
available,
That's a
right?
good one.
But it's like, I kind of, in my mind, it's not on the, until the fire hall is like under construction with a completion date, right? It's not something we're actively planning something else to go in. Parkland,
But
you
you
know,
could,
like-
you could be planning for that fire hall, the old fire hall. Yeah.
but, you know, and then it's like sort of back of the current library lot, like there's not, you know, we basically own parkland. So unless it's, you know, envisioned to close parkland to provide whatever housing, right? Like that's where we're at, so, yeah, it's not a huge.
Okay, why don't we leave that
Yeah.
with you guys?
Yeah.
Okay, with you two?
So do you want me to share those, or?
I'm
Not
not
now, I don't
this,
think so.
this one.
No.
Could we just go back to the island?
Island plan?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
So the Affordable Housing Reserve Fund, I mean, that's in play with the MRDP, supporting Birch, continue to explore options. Yeah. Monitor and respond to established and new program opportunities to fund housing supported by other levels of government. There actually hasn't been that much that has come up that's new in the past year
No,
that I can recall. I mean, the major development is the Metro Vancouver increasing the per residence housing levy to $4 a household in the coming year to build up the reserves for,
$4,
yeah. It'll get them $4 million a year. Well, last year it was 1, the year before it was 0.
Yeah.
So it's movement.
Mhm.
Monitor and respond, yep, just talked about that. And then continue community engagement, and that's where we did the Red Smart series.
Yeah.
So there's nothing there that we've done nothing on,
Yeah.
with maybe the exception of number 3, that just needs to get firmed up a bit. So that's pretty good.
Yeah.
So I guess the thing that we need to think about, and maybe we could get on the agenda for next meeting if possible, is what steps does the housing committee ideally want to see in next year's island plan? And those can be
Yeah.
put forward and
Yeah.
council can discuss
Yeah,
them.
I would subscribe to that, because I'd see we get a little bit more of a holistic look at this and stuff.
Yeah, so I think, can we plan for our next meeting to be a fair chunk of it, maybe 60 minutes, to be like a work plan brainstorming session, like we did last time? So I'll, we'll get the Post-its and the markers, and we'll kind of be keeping that in mind and keeping our, we'll have our work plan from this past year, what carries forward, what do we drop, what's new. Yeah, so we'll do that for our next meeting. Great. Okay. Anything else? Because I think we're either just on time or a little early. Which is great.
That's okay.